Hello, good morning. This is Dr. Ajaz, and you are watching your own news channel, AFK Newsroom. In today's session, we are going to discuss US Iran nuclear and peace negotiations, and we will discuss the role of Pakistan and Qatar and their mediation efforts uh, at Lucerne. Uh, Lake Lake Lucerne Summit, Switzerland, uh, in what diplomats are calling of one of the most consequential geopolitical um, developments of the decade. The United States and Iran have agreed to a 60-day roadmap toward a comprehensive peace deal brokered through marathon negotiations in Switzerland, with Qatar and Pakistan serving as the mediators. Our, um, our team is there on keeping eye on minute to minute coverage with full time analysis. So I'll give an executive summary of today's analytical report first. Following more than 14 months of intermittent, often turbulent diplomacy, US and Iranian negotiators concluded a landmark round of high level talks at the Lake Lucerne Summit, Basenstock Resort, Switzerland, on June 21 and 22nd, 2026. The talks attended by US Vice President JD Vance and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and the Senate senior delegations from Pakistan and Qatar produced an agreed roadmap and multiple structural commitments that represent the most significant breakthrough since the failed 2015 JCPOA era. Keynote key outcomes at a glance of today's analytical report are: a formal 60-day roadmap toward a final peace and nuclear agreement was agreed upon by both parties. Iran agreed to invite IAEA nuclear inspectors back to the country, described by Vice President J.D. Vance, and a major milestone for the American people. Thirdly, a high-level commitment and high-level committee was established to provide political oversight, with working groups on nuclear uh, monitoring, sanctions, and dispute resolution. Fourth point is the de-escalation, de-confliction, not escalation, sorry, but a de-confliction cell for Lebanon was created, co-facilitated by Qatar and Pakistan, to end active military operations in the country. A communication line was established to ensure safe commercial passage through the Strait of Hormuz for the 60-day period. And finally, Iran's oil and petrochemical export restrictions were partially lifted. The US naval blockade was removed, and some frozen assets were released. So let's start the in-depth analysis of today's program. How we got here, a 14-month timeline we need to go through. The negotiations traced their roots to April 12, 2025, when the first round to indirect talks was held in Muscat, Oman, with Omani Foreign Minister Badr al Busaidi as mediator, a U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi led their respective delegations in separate um, in separate rooms, relaying messages through Oman. Both sides described the discussions as constructive. Iran proposed a three-step plan: temporarily lower uranium enrichment to 3.67% in exchange for access to frozen US financial assets and authorization to resume oil exports. April June. April to June 2025, negotiations collapsed, war begins. After multiple rounds in Muscat and Rome, the Trump administration pressed Iran to dismantle both its nuclear and ballistic missile program entirely, a demand Iran rejected outright, with a White House uh, imposed 60-day deadline expired. Israel launched massive strikes against Iran, igniting a full-scale military conflict in June 2025. The IAEA access Iran nuclear sites, uh, and as Iran barred inspectors following the strikes. In February 2026, indirect talks resumes on February 6, 2026. Indirect talks resumed in Muscat, Oman. This time, with Pakistan entering the mediation alongside Oman. Uh, key striking points, including Iran's nuclear enrichment, its ballistic missile program, and sanctions relief timelines. Vice President J.D. Vance stated the U.S. core goal was an affirmative commitment that Iran would not seek a nuclear weapon or the to rapidly active one, uh, uh, tools to rapidly achieve one. March and April 2026, Pakistan's 15 points proposal was presented in Islamabad talks. It was March 25, 2026, when Pakistani officials delivered a US drafted 15-point ceasefire proposal to Tehran, and Iran rejected it, issuing a 5-point counter proposal. On April 7, President Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan, which Iran confirmed the next day. On April 11 and 12, high-level talks were held in Islamabad, the first direct engagement at this level in history. Vice President J.D. Vance, Witkoff, and Jared Kushner led the U.S. delegations. Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bakir Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi led Tehran's team. After 21 hours of talks, both sides left without an agreement. Trump subsequently uh, threatened a full naval blockade on Iran. Then May and June 2026, towards Islamabad memorandum. Uh, through May, Pakistani mediators formulated a um, one-page agenda, keeping on 14 points a memo on parameters to end the war. Trump threatened to resume the bombing on Iran if Iran refused. On May 23, top negotiators from the both sides approved a draft peace deal sent to both presidents for ratification. On June 12, new ceasefire conditions for 60 days were agreed. On June 17, President Trump and Masoud Pezeshkian digitally signed the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, a 14-point framework providing for an end to military strikes, reopening the Strait of Hormuz toll-free, and an end to the U.S. naval blockade. June 21, 2026, Lake Lucerne summit starts. This is the basic today's story. Following the MOU signing, US and Iranian delegations held extended talks at the Bergenstock resort overlooking Lake Lucerne in Switzerland in a quadrilateral format with Qatar and Pakistan. The marathon 18 hours session was nearly derailed when Trump, in a Fox News interview, threatened to resume bombing on Iran and collect tolls on the Strait of Hormuz, um, uh, prompting Iran to temporarily refusing to continue. Pakistan and Qatari mediators intervened and talks resumed. The summit concluded with a joint statement declaring encouraging progress and the creation of multiple oversight mechanisms. Here is the, we must discuss about current status. What was agreed at late Lucerne? That those are uh, five points are there. Uh, 5 points are there. We can say what is the current status. So within those 5 points, we can say categorically the first 60-day roadmap given by these peace talks. Qatar and Pakistan, in a joint statement, confirmed both sides agreed to a roadmap toward reaching a final deal within 60 days. Technical talks are expected to continue at Virgin Stock breakthrough this week. The roadmap builds on the June 17 MOU and represents the most structured diplomatic architecture yet agreed between Washington and Tehran. The Lake Lucerne summit was concluded uh, and was not concluded, but Lake Lucerne summit was conducted in a positive and constructive atmosphere. Encouraging progress has been made, including the creation of a mechanism for further technical talks. A statement by Qatar and joint statement from Qatar and Pakistan, June 22nd, 2026. Second point is nuclear inspection. That is basically a historic success on the side and for the people of USA. In perhaps the most significant single development from the summit, Iran agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into the country. Vice President Vance called it the first step in permanently denuclearizing or permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran. Inspectors could potentially enter Iran as early as this week. The U.S. is also working to to secure Iran's enriched uranium stockpile to make it effectively impossible for Tehran to rebuild its program. Third point is high-level committee and working groups. A high-level committee was established to provide political oversight on the mediation. Beneath it, three working groups will focus on uh, points like nuclear issues and IAEA monitoring. Secondly, sanctions relief and monitoring and dispute resolution to ensure effective memorandum of understanding implementation. Fourth point is Lebanon deconfliction cell. The US and Iran agreed to create a deconfliction cell on Lebanon facilitated by Qatar and Pakistan aimed at ending uh, military operations there. Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi called this the first real test for the agreement's effectiveness. The cell would address ongoing clashes between Israeli forces and Hezbollah. Israel's position that it will remain in southern Lebanon as long as necessary and continues to complicate this mechanism. Fifth point is Strait of Hormuz communication line. A direct line of communication was established between U.S. and Iranian military and maritime officials to avoid incidents and miscommunication during the 60-day window, ensuring safe passage for commercial vessels. Roughly 20% of the world's petroleum transits the strait. Its status has direct implications for global oil markets and American consumers. As Abbas Araghchi posted on X, formerly Twitter, tireless Pakistani and Qatari mediation has delivered major progress to end Lebanon war. Oil and petrochemical exports are waived, blockade lifted, some frozen assets released, and major reconstruction and development plan launched for Iran. First real test Lebanon deconfliction cell, Abbas Arakchi, June 22nd, 2026. So, if we talk about the role of mediators as Pakistan and Qatar has played, first of all, we will discuss Pakistan and then we will go towards the role of Qatar. Pakistan, as far as has played its role, we can conclude and we can discuss Pakistan in few words, as Pakistan has merged as perhaps the most indispensable diplomatic actor in this crisis, led by Prime Minister Mr. Sharif, Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar, and Chief of Army Staff Field Marshal Asam Munir. Pakistan hosted the April Islamabad talks, delivered multiple ceasefire proposals between Washington and Tehran, and kept channels open even when talks collapsed. Uh, the US delegation praised Pakistan's persistence through controversies merged in May when anonymous US officials alleged Pakistan had covertly allowed Iranian military aircraft to park on its airfields and may have presented a more favorable version of Iran's position to Washington. Senator Lindsey Graham called Pakistan's mediating role problematic given its stance on the Abraham Accord as and Israel. Uh, despite threats, despite these tensions, Pakistan remained the backbone of the negotiation, and with officials increasingly framing the process and the Lebanon process as a Islamabad process. As far as the Qatar role of mediation is concerned, Qatar contributed critical diplomatic infrastructure, hosting back channel communication and co-facilitating the deconfliction mechanism on Lebanon. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani traveled personally to Tehran ahead of talks. Qatar also played a key financial role. A unique arrangement was developed whereby any Iranian frozen assets unfrozen as part of the future agreement, and um, future agreement would require both US and Qatari approval before the disbursement, ensuring no funds could be diverted to fund terrorism. Qatar underscored its long-term tragic rationale, noting that we will be neighbors with Iran, the future of humankind. So, if we say who are the key players at the negotiating table, those are J.D. Vance, U.S. Vice President, led U.S. delegation in U.S. delegation in Switzerland, declared declared significant progress on nuclear and Lebanon. Steve Witkoff, U.S. Special Envoy, consistent US-led negotiator since April 2025 to till now in Oman talks. Jared Kushner, senior advisor, brought in for Islamabad talks key back channel operator. Abbas Araghchi, Iranian foreign minister, Iran's chief diplomat, credited Pakistan and Qatar for major progress. Mohammed MB Ghalibaf, Iran parliament speaker, led Iranian delegation in Islamabad, and political heavyweight Shahbaz Sharif, Pakistani Prime Minister, Asam Munir, Chief of Pakistan Army Chief of Army Staff in Pakistan, and Sheikh Mohammed Al Thani, Qatari Prime Minister, who traveled especially to Tehran and co-authored of joint mediator settlements. Mediator statements. Uh, Here are some unresolved issues and fault lines also, which needs to be addressed in this unbiased and neutral uh, uh, analysis report. Uh, we can categorically distribute and break through unresolved issues and fault lines in some points. First one is nuclear enrichment. The that is, of course, the course dispute between Iran and US government. Iran's President Pezeshkian stated on June 21, "What is certain is that we will never back down um, from the right to enrich uranium, and the other side is also forced to accept it. The US has demand zero enrichment. This fundamental disagreement has not been resolved. It has been deferred to the 60-day technical negotiation phase. Iran has indicated willingness at times to transfer enriched uranium to a third country rather than handing it to the US directly. Second point is, which is unresolved till now, that is Lebanon issue. While a deconfliction cell for Lebanon was created, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made clear that Israeli troops will remain in southern Lebanon as long as necessary. Israel also says the ceasefire does not include Lebanon, but the US has sought direct Israeli-Lebanese talks, but the situation remains volatile, with Hezbollah and Israel forces exchanging heavy fire even after the ceasefire announcements. Next point is next unresolved point and fault line is frozen assets, a political minefield. Um, reports of a potential uh, $300 billion fund for Iran, which Trump flatly refused and denied, calling it fake news, reflect the extreme sensitivity around economic relief. While some frozen assets have been released and oil petrochemical exports waivers granted, and any major assets released faces intense domestic political scrutiny in the US, and the Qatari co-approval mechanism was designed precisely to address these concerns. Then Abraham Accord linkages are very much concerned in this peace process. Trump stated in May that any peace agreement with Iran must be tied to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Pakistan establishing diplomatic ties with Israel, a demand that adds enormous complexity. Pakistan has not recognized Israel and is unlikely to do so under current domestic political conditions. So Pakistan's credibility questions here. Allegations that Pakistan covertly harbored Iranian military aircraft and may have softened Iran's negotiating position in its communications to Washington have raised doubts in Washington about Pakistan's impartiality. Graham's public criticism underscores bipartisan unease that could threaten the Islamabad process standing as neutral grounds. What this means for American viewers here in under this category we can break down with some points. First one is gas prices and energy markets, as the Strait of Hormuz now kept open under the MOU handles approximately 20% of global petrochemical supply. Oil prices saw modest declines following the late Lucerne summit announcements. Vice President Vance noted lower gas prices as one direct domestic benefit for Americans. Any reversal, if talks collapse within the 60 days window, could cause significant price spikes. Security is as far as security concerns for America, is America safer? Iran's agreement to readmit IAEA inspectors is the most concrete nuclear security gain in decade. However, analysts cautions that MOU is a framework, not a treaty, but and the 2015 JCPOA ultimately collapsed. The 60-day window is tight for resolving deeply enriched dispute over enrichment measures and sanctions. The broader Middle East de-escalation in Lebanon. If the de-confliction cell works, uh, it would benefit Israel's security and reduce the risk of a broader regional war. Trump has made clear he wants a ceasefire that protects Israel's right to self-defense while preventing isolated clashes from escalating. Then the final points, what experts are saying on this perspective, we can categorically define as optimistic view, cautious view, and skeptical view. What is optimistic view according to experts? That is the creation of structured working groups, IAEA, re-entry and a Lebanon deconfliction mechanism represents the most concrete institutional um, institutional architecture since the JCPOA. The 60-day clock is tight but achievable if political will holds on both sides. Then, a cautious view, according to experts, the MOU deliberately defers the hardest questions, enrichment measures, sanctions, to the tactical phase. Trump's threats mid-summit, Iran's walkout attempt and Iran's independent Lebanon posture show how fragile this process remains. Diplomatic roadmaps are not signed treaties. Then finally, the skeptical view, according to the experts, are Iran has never agreed to zero enrichment. Uh, the Abraham Accord linkage, Trump introduced a deal breaker for Pakistan domestically. Questions about Pakistan's neutrality and the speed of U.S. domestic political pressure. Um, Particularly in an election year, could unravel the process before 60 days are up. Then here are some points from my side what to watch in the coming days. Those are, will IAEA inspectors enter Iran this week, and what will they find? Secondly, will the Lebanon deconfliction cell successfully halt Hezbollah-Israel exchanges? Thirdly, can the nuclear working group narrow the gap on enrichment within 60 days? Fourthly, how will Congress respond to any sanctions relief or asset release provisions? Will Saudi Arabia or Pakistan signal any movement toward Abraham Accord normalization as part of a deal? And finally, what happens on June 18, the day technical talks were previously postponed in Switzerland? So, where does this leave us? The short answer, cautiously optimistic, but both eyes wide open. But with both eyes wide open, for the first time in years, the US and Iran are talking directly at the highest levels, with IAEA inspectors potentially returning to Iranian soil this week. But the hardest questions, on nuclear enrichment, on Lebanon, on billions of dollars in frozen assets, remain unanswered. Um, Qatar and Pakistan have shown extraordinary diplomatic stamina. The next 60 days will determine whether this roadmap leads to genuine, lasting peace or becomes another chapter in a long history of failed negotiations. We will stay on this story, and um, we will bring with further updates tomorrow. So keep tuned and stay with us. Take care of yourself and take care of your channel. Goodbye till tomorrow.